Royal Lytham and St Anne's 1996. And for 4 days, American Tom Lehman had battled the world's finest players and the unforgiving Lytham Lynx. To the victor, fame and fortune, but more importantly, the title Open Champion. Lehman's name was the latest to be added to the Roll of Honour, a list stretching back to 1860 and the first Open Championship at Prestwick in Scotland. Played over 3 rounds of the 12-hole course, the prize awaiting the winner was not the now famous claret jug, but an ornate belt. The first Open champion was Willie Park of Musselburgh, but the early days were dominated by old and young Tom Morris. Throughout the history of the championship, many of the greatest names in golf would be added to the list. James Braid, J.H. Taylor and Harry Varden. The great American amateur Bobby Jones, and later the consummate professionals such as Arnold Palmer, Jack Nicklaus and Tom Watson. And the modern giants, Greg Norman and Nick Faldo, each with a unique place in the history of golf's oldest championship. But the players are only part of the Open's rich history. The backcloth upon which this annual drama is played out has no less a role. The championship courses, with their history, their idiosyncrasies, their beauty and their dangers, have witnessed some of the most exciting moments in sporting history. There are 8 venues in the championship rota, each of them a seaside links course. Further south is Royal St George's on the Kent coast. There are 2 other championship courses in England, both on the Lancashire coast, Royal Birkdale and Royal Lytham St Anne's. Turnberry, with its famous lighthouse, is the newest addition to the championship rota, staging its first Open in 1977. Muirfield, with a much longer pedigree, staged its first Open in 1892. The old course at St Andrews is the most famous links in the world and is the home of the Royal and Ancient Golf Club. Carnoustie, the most northerly of the Open courses, staged its last Open in 1975. And finally, Royal Troon, the venue for the 1997 championship. Troon lies on Scotland's Ayrshire coast, one of the finest golfing areas in the British Isles. It's a popular holiday destination for players from all around the world, and visitors arriving at Glasgow Prestwick International would need just a pitching wedge from the runway to reach the fairways of historic Prestwick. The town of Troon is a 10-minute drive from the airport. Its main business these days is tourism, with golfers accounting for a large part of the revenue. Royal Troon Golf Club lies on the outskirts of the town, nestled between the sweeping sandy beach and the coastal railway line. The course is a traditional out and back links, with the front 9 skirting the sea to the right and the back 9 hugging the railway line inland before sweeping back towards the single-storey granite clubhouse. The club was founded in 1878 when a number of local gentlemen met in the Portland Arms Hotel. The man credited as the instigator of the meeting was a local medical practitioner and the club's first secretary, Dr. John Hyatt, whose portrait hangs in the club dining room. His beloved Troon would have to wait until its centenary year in 1978 to be given the Royal Charter. But long before it became Royal Troon, the club had established its golfing pedigree with an impressive list of champions. The story of Troon's first major championship, the 1923 Open, started across the Atlantic in New York City. It was from there that the US Open champion Gene Saracen set sail to Scotland, hoping to add the claret jug to his collection. The crowds flocked to Troon to watch him. But until the 1960s, every player down to the reigning champion had to qualify for the tournament. Saracen, perhaps discomforted by the Scottish weather, struggled, and before the Open even began, his dream was over.
My first adventure here in 1923 is when I failed to qualify, and I was a 4-1 favorite to win because I got caught in a terrible storm the second day, and I took 85, and I was out by 1 shot. But I promised Bernard Darwin that I would come back if I had to swim the ocean. And I came back in 32.
While Saracen would have to wait 9 years for his victory, Arthur Havers from Coombe Hill in Surrey set about winning the title. He opened with 3 rounds of 73 to leave himself just 2 shots ahead of the defending champion Walter Hagen. The American was an experienced campaigner, and few gave Havers a chance of holding on to his lead. But a final round of 76 gave him a 1-shot victory over Hagen. The British fans would have to savour their moment. Havers would be the only home player to win the Open between 1921 and 1933. And thus far, Arthur Havers, Troon's first Open champion, is the only Briton to have won the title on the famous links. It was the Ayrshire railway line that first made the course accessible as an open venue to the thousands of spectators who wanted to see the best players in the world. And the line itself is a major feature of the course. Troon Harbour was also a popular and hospitable resting place for yachts and pleasure boats. And some hardy souls have sailed from as far as Canada to watch the drama unfold. But by the time of Troon's second Open in 1950, air travel was the favoured means of transport, and the jets arrived from around the world, bringing with them the world's finest players. Among them was South Africa's Bobby Locke. At Royal St George's a year earlier, Bobby Locke had won the Open, beating Harry Bradshaw by 12 strokes in a 36-hole playoff. He arrived at Troon confident of retaining his title, but after 3 rounds he trailed Welshman Di Rees.
Starting the last day 2 strokes behind Rees, Locke knows that a round in 70 is his safe limit. This round he does in 69. Di Rees, playing excellent golf, couldn't hold his lead. Frank Stranahan of America is unplaced, although he beats the course record in the final round. Crowds watched W.J. Branch, who was second after the first day's play, lose ground despite good putting. Going round with pen instead of clubs is Henry Cotton. Fred Daly ties with Rees for 3rd place. All 4 leaders beat the lowest aggregate ever returned in the championship. A bad day for Australia's Van Nieder, who tries hard but just couldn't make it. Now it's the 18th, and excitement is mounting. Playing perfect golf, Locke, behind until the 14th hole, has now regained the lead. And now for the last hole. Tough, but it's the luck of the game. Anyway, he's beaten the record by 4 strokes, finishing 2 ahead of his nearest competitor. A memorable end to a magnificent contest.
Bobby Locke would go on to win 4 Open titles, the last in 1957 at St Andrews. The man from the Transvaal was one of the most popular foreign golfers to play in Great Britain, and was Troon's first overseas Open champion. He would not, however, be the last. Troon's next Open championship was staged in 1962, and the winner that year would change the face of world golf forever. 2 years earlier, at a flooded St Andrews, American superstar Arnold Palmer had finished runner-up to Australia's Kel Nagle in the Centenary Open. A year later at Royal Birkdale, Palmer won by a single stroke from Di Rees. By the time he arrived at Troon in 1962, Palmer had almost single-handedly resurrected American interest in the Open, which had declined alarmingly in the previous 20 years. The crowds flocked to see him, And the swaggering, smiling champion didn't disappoint. By the time the tournament began, Arnie's army had become as much a British phenomenon as an American one. At Troon, he played some of the greatest golf of his illustrious career, on a hard, fast-running championship course which many players found difficult to handle. Palmer strode majestically to victory. His four-round total of 276 was a championship record, and his six-stroke margin of victory over Kellnagel has yet to be bettered. Palmer's influential presence at Troon also contributed to a significant change in the organization of the Open. The Royal and Ancient had always required every player to qualify for the tournament, irrespective of his status.
That was when I thought that it was appropriate to say that I didn't think that the defending champion had to qualify. I thought that, and the RNA took that under advisement, and of course they shortly after that they changed the qualifying rules so that there were some exempt players, and I think that has worked out very well to help the Open.
But it was Palmer's presence that did most to help the Open. The tournament was broadcast on television in the United States, reawakening transatlantic interest. And the 1962 Troon Open marked a watershed in the fortunes of golf's oldest championship.
Shots on the final hole as Arnold Palmer breaks the record for the British Open by 2 shots with a total of 276. Another of the great sights that we've seen around the world on Wide World of Sport.
Whatever I may have done to ignite the British Open, if that's the proper term, is very gratifying, and certainly to see what is happening and has happened in the British Open in the recent years is fantastic.
While Palmer was famous for his aggressive golf, Royal Troon's motto, "Tamate qua machte," translates into as much by stealth as by strength. Nowhere is this better illustrated than at the postage stamp, which has tested many fine players, including England's Peter Oosterhuis.
Well, the wind is the big factor there. I think without the wind, you can be thinking about a birdie, hitting a wedge or a 9-iron and thinking about hitting it close. If there's any wind, I can remember hitting a 5-iron there, and I think it's 120-something yards. Then you've got to hit a great shot, put it on the green, and you can get into some very bad bunkers. And there's horror stories of people going back and forth across the green because the green's not very wide. So the weather's a big factor, but it's a great hole.
Whether Oosterhuis would have been so complimentary at the 1973 Open is doubtful. His first-round tee shot landed on the hill that protects the left-hand side of the green, and he was in deep trouble. But Oosterhuis, who salvaged a 5, is by no means the only player to fall foul of the terror surrounding the postage stamp. The dubious honor of the record score at the postage stamp goes to German amateur Hermann Tissis, who took 15 in the 1950 Open. Many of Royal Troon's members have their own horror stories, and double figures are not uncommon. But the postage stamp will always be associated with one player in particular. 50 years after failing to qualify, Gene Sarazen returned to Troon to collect a special award from the club.
Well, I'm just delighted to come back here after 50 years. I don't recognize many of my old colleagues. They're up there on the first tee waiting for me, Hagen, Jones, and Armour. They're saying, "Hurry up, Sarazen, hurry up." But you got a long wait.
Then, at 71 years of age, he stood on the tee at the 8th hole in the first round.
Gene Sarazen, who failed to qualify here 50 years ago this week when he was US Open champion. Here goes the postage stamp. Let's watch it.
Saracen followed his hole-in-one with a birdie the next day. He failed to make the cut, but the torch had been passed to a new generation of stars.
This is my farewell tournament, and I'm seeing the greatest championship of the 50 years that I've been playing. I've never seen a stronger field in the British Open or any Open than you have right here. These boys that are here this year are all millionaires. They're not here for the money, they're here for that title.
But the world's finest were in for a torrid time in 1973, as Troon extended a windy welcome to them. Many were finding the conditions difficult, including the hero of 1962, Arnold Palmer, who shot a first-round 72. Jack Nicklaus, already a winner of 2 Open titles, showed his experience in the testing conditions on his way to a first-round 69. In the wind, the postage stamp was baring its teeth, as Tom Weiskopf was to discover. That recovery was to play a crucial part in holding together Weiskopf's opening round as he posted a 68 to take the lead. Joining Nicklaus, 1 shot off the lead at the end of the first day, was Weiskopf's best friend Bert Yancey. If day 1 had been difficult, then day 2 was worse. Though the wind died down a little, the heavens opened and both players and spectators needed to show their character to brave the elements. Only a few of the field were able to challenge the Troon course with any conviction. Nicklaus shot a creditable 70, but that wasn't enough to dislodge the overnight leader from the top of the board. Tom Weiskopf's 67 was enough to give him a 3-shot cushion over Johnny Miller and Bert Yancey. Any hopes of an improvement in the weather were dashed as day 3 dawned. Many were expecting one man to make hay, while the sun failed to shine. But Troon was proving to be a harsh mistress, and events at the railway hole typified Jack Nicklaus's day. The great man was left to rue another missed opportunity on his way to a third-round 76 that all but extinguished his hopes of winning the Open. Weiskopf maintained his concentration throughout the round, despite some unwelcome distractions from Prestwick Airport. Despite his resilience, Weiskopf's lead had been whittled away by the time they approached the closing holes. But as the rains came down again, it was Miller who stumbled at the final hurdle. Miller's 67 had been the best round among the leaders, but Weiskopf had held his game together magnificently to stay 1 shot ahead of the field. He had now held the lead for 3 days of the championship, and it looked as if only Miller could snatch golf's greatest prize from his grasp. But as both Miller and Weiskopf prepared for a 2-man duel, pressure was about to be applied from a not wholly unexpected quarter in the shape of Jack Nicklaus. Perhaps stung by his experiences on day 3, Nicklaus attacked the course with gusto. By the time he reached the 18th, he needed this putt for a course record 65. With Nicklaus in the clubhouse at 8 under, neither of the leaders could afford to slip up. But that's precisely what Miller began to do over the opening holes. Weiskopf, on the other hand, refused to concede his lead, and under pressure, his putting stroke never faltered. As they approached the 18th, Weiskopf had a 3-shot cushion. In terrible conditions over 4 days, the man from Ohio had maintained the rhythm and concentration that had occasionally deserted him on the big occasion in the past. His elegant swing had withstood tremendous pressure from both the Troon links and the likes of Miller and Nicklaus, and he was now on the threshold of his greatest achievement in professional golf. For Miller, bitter disappointment and joint second place with England's Neil Coles. For Weiskopf, a final round of 70 and a 4-round total of 276, equaling the all-time aggregate record for the Open, which had been set by Arnold Palmer at Troon 11 years earlier. The 1973 Open Championship would, surprisingly, prove to be Tom Weiskopf's only major title. But for a man with a deep respect for the history and traditions of golf, it was a moment to savor.
Congratulations, Tom. Thank you very much. Fine start.
Thank you very much. Believe me, to win my first major championship in the country where golf started is something that you can't explain. It's the most inspirational place I've ever played golf. I'm very proud to be your champion. Thank you.
While both the players and spectators had endured the rain in 1973, the element that really bears Troon's teeth is the ferocious wind that can whip in from the Atlantic. Few know the dangers of the links better than Brian Anderson, Royal Troon's professional for nearly 26 years.
The wind, if it comes, will bother everybody here. So it really makes a huge difference. I mean, I played here yesterday into just a crosswind coming off the sea. Wind was coming right out the west, and I had a drive and a 1-iron at both the first and the second holes. Well, normally I'm hitting a drive and a wedge at those holes.
But it isn't just the top professionals who've had to cope with windy Troon. The Amateur Championship has been held there on 4 occasions, and lists Peter McAvoy and R&A Secretary Michael Bonalek as its 2 most recent champions. The first Amateur was held there in 1938, when a young American travelled from Atlanta to emulate the achievement of his lifelong friend, the great Bobby Jones.
Troon. It was an international final in the British Amateur Golf Championship. Charles Yates, the American, fought out the last 36 holes with Cecil Ewing of Ireland. There was a big gallery following to encourage the Irishman, and he put up a gallant fight. But Yates wore him down and finished the victor by 3-2. So that's how our Amateur Golf Cup took a ticket across the Atlantic.
I came over with the Walker Cup team in 1938. I couldn't make a putt 2 feet long when I first got here, and I said, I'm just going to walk up and hit them, and all of a sudden they started going in, and just a fair to middling golfer like Charlie Yates, everything went right for me, and I fortunately was able to win, and I never dreamed it was possible.
The next time the Amateur Championship visited Troon was in 1956, when 200 players arrived to contest the title. For the first time since the end of the war, the final was an all-British affair, as Englishman John B. Harrell took on Scotland's Leslie Taylor. On a bright, blustery day, it was B. Harrell who triumphed 5-4, a remarkable achievement for a young man who had just celebrated his 18th birthday. Though he had beaten a Scot in the final, the Troon crowd delighted in his victory, and to this day, John B. Harrell is still the youngest player ever to win the Amateur Championship. At the 1982 Open Championship, the first since the club had become Royal Troon, it was another young man, 22-year-old Bobby Clampett from Monterey, California, who made the early headlines. An opening day 67 was followed by a 68, and after 5 holes on the third day, he held a commanding 7-shot lead. But Clampett, like many before him, was to find that links golf can be unforgiving. As he approached the 6th, named Turnberry, the longest hole on the open rota. Few professionals have played it more times than Colin Montgomery, whose father is the secretary at Royal Troon.
You know, it's a good 3-shotter, and it takes the most important shots, the first 2 shots here. If you're on the fairway in the first 2 shots, you're going to make par or birdie. You should do. But if you leave that track the first 2 shots, you're in trouble.
And trouble was exactly what Clampett was in. His second shot caught a fairway bunker, and he could only move the ball a few yards forward. And things were about to get worse.
And that's going left. Oh dear, oh dear, oh dear. It clatters through the crowd. And Clampett in all sorts of trouble. Well, he's found a bad lie in thick rough, and he's going to be playing 5 on this par 5 hole. I shudder to think how many strokes he may drop here. It's not going to make it. It's right up against the face in the corner of that left-hand bunker. Oh dear, oh dear. Now this is going to call for a lot of nerve and skill. He'll do well to get it out. Yes, it's on the green. But that's 6 and still a lot to do. Well, what an adventurous 7 this would be, if he can hold this. No, and that was a weak one. Getting a little flustered. Manages to get it in at last, but that's a 3 over par 8. Sympathetic applause for a triple bogey.
It wasn't just 3 shots that disappeared. Clampett's confidence visibly drained, and the rest of the field, including 3 times Open champion Tom Watson, began to sense that the race was by no means over. Watson finished the third day in 5th place on 2 under par. Troon's champion of 2 decades earlier couldn't turn the clock back, but Arnie provided his army with the usual roller coaster ride. After 2 opening rounds of 69, Zimbabwe's Nick Price faltered a little with a 74, but was still in 2nd place. And as for Clampett, well, he still held the lead by 1 stroke after a round of 78, but it had been a tough day on the Royal Troon links. On a warm and breezy final day, 2 English players mounted a challenge.
Come on, come on, come on, come on.
The first was a young Nick Faldo. The second, the more experienced Peter Oosterhuis. But the biggest move was being made by the man from Southern Africa. Nick Price, in the final pairing with Bobby Clampett, was adding to the pressure on the 3rd round leader. As Clampett faltered, Tom Watson began to scent victory and the chance of a fourth Open title. Oosterhuis too was playing some sparkling golf. The big Englishman shot a final round of 70 to lead in the clubhouse on 285. And just one shot behind him was Faldo, who produced a dazzling 69. But behind them, Watson was in a position to take the lead. In the 18th, he had 2 putts to take him 1 shot ahead of Oosterhuis and give him the lead in the clubhouse. A 4-round total of 284. But still out on the course, Price had every chance of beating Watson's score. At the par 3 17th, however, Price was in trouble. His tee shot landed short, as did his chip. And when he failed to sink the putt, he had dropped 4 shots in the last 5 holes. Coming to the 18th, Price needed a birdie to force a playoff.
Now the climax of this 111th Open. This putt to tie with Watson and force a playoff.
You can't do anything about winning a tournament. You've done all you can. You've finished, and it's up to the other players to either win or lose.
If I had probably been in the same situation now, I may have won that by 4 or 5 shots. And I think when you're 25 years old and you realize that you have the ability to win a major, it must give you some kind of confidence. There were so many things that I had to learn about golf, and had I won that, it may have changed the course of my career. It's undoubtedly, to me, the championship of all time, and I don't think my career would be complete unless I won that.
Price would have to wait 12 years. The day belonged to Watson.
I didn't expect to win that championship, but fortunately I did. I'd rather have it in my own hands anytime. I like to come down to the last hole knowing what I have to do to win.
For the 1989 Open, the most recent to be held at Royal Troon, the course had been baked hard and fast by a drought. A situation that would not occur again since the introduction of a sophisticated new sprinkler system which allows head greenkeeper Billy McLaughlin the best of both worlds. Dry, fast-running greens and fairways, and long, difficult rough.
We want to try and get the course hard and dry and fast. That's a typical links type of conditions for the thing. And if it got too much, we've got a watering system here that we can kind of level things out a wee bit.
But in 1989, the spectators and the players were guaranteed a hot and hard 4 days on the Royal Troon links. Australia's Wayne Grady revelled in the heat to lead after 2 rounds. But the 1982 Troon champion Tom Watson was just 2 shots further back and playing some inspired golf. On the 3rd day, American Mark Calcavecchia began to gain ground, and he too was enjoying the sunshine at Troon. Watson shot his 3rd sub-70 round of the tournament, and with 18 holes left to play, he was in a dangerous position, just 1 shot behind Wayne Grady, who had maintained his composure to retain the lead. On a warm final day, Grady seemed immune to the pressure of leading a major championship, opening with 3 birdies in the first 5 holes. Behind him, Calcavecchia was having an inconsistent front 9, interspersing some fine approach play with some less than impressive putting. As Watson began to fall away, Calcavecchia was guilty of not taking his chances when they presented themselves. But at the turn, it was Grady who began to struggle, and his nerves were starting to look a little ragged. At the 12th, Calcavecchia enjoyed the sort of shot that can often mean that the golfing gods are on your side. But up ahead of the leaders, Australia's Greg Norman was putting together a stunning round of golf that included some spectacular putting. As he approached the closing holes, Royal Troon's defences were being destroyed, and Norman was marching relentlessly towards the course record. At the 18th, a simple tap-in for par gave him a 64, the lead in the clubhouse, and the greatest round ever seen at Royal Troon. With the Australian in the clubhouse on 275, Calcavecchia needed to birdie the last to tie for the lead. A fine approach shot gave him a great opportunity to join Norman as the clubhouse leader. But behind Calcavecchia in the final pairing, Grady was in a commanding position, needing to par the final 2 holes to win. At the 17th, though, his bunker shot left him a long putt to save par. As Grady short-shaved the hole, Calcavecchia was making his birdie putt at 18. The Australian now needed to birdie the last to win the championship, but his approach shot had found the rough at the back of the green. Grady's 71 meant that he, Norman, and a relaxed Mark Calcavecchia would now face a 4-hole playoff, the first in Open history, to decide who would be the champion.
You know, Wayne Grady led that tournament from the middle of the first round, I think, and it was his tournament to win. And at that time, I didn't think we were going to be in the playoff anyway. And next thing I know, I was standing on the first tee at Troon, and I said, well, let's just go out and enjoy this and have some fun. And, you know, I was just very relaxed.
With Grady and Calcavecchia parring the first, it was Norman who drew first blood with a birdie. At the second hole, the man who had led for the final 3 days was about to see his hopes of winning the championship dashed. Grady did very little wrong. A fine drive was followed by a decent approach, but with Norman already having seized the initiative at the first, he knew that par might see him drop out of contention. Grady already looked resigned to his fate, but Calcavecchia was not about to let Norman run away with the title. A birdie for the American, but Norman still had the opportunity to birdie himself. The playoff had now become a showdown between Norman and Calcavecchia, and at the third, the pendulum was about to swing once more. Calcavecchia looked increasingly relaxed, parred the hole, and it looked as if Norman would comfortably follow him. But his chip was too aggressive and left him with a tricky putt to make if he was going to save par. With just one hole to play, the two men were level, and it was to be on the 18th tee that the championship was decided. Calcavecchia's drive found the rough on the right of the fairway, but left him with a shot to the green. But the long-hitting Norman, electing to use his driver instead of an iron, blasted the ball into a fairway bunker. From the sand, he had little chance of reaching the green, but the issue was about to be put beyond doubt as Calcavecchia produced the shot of the tournament. His 5-iron was beautifully struck, landing just 7 feet from the pin. Norman, realizing that the Open had slipped away from him, could only move the ball forward and into another bunker. It was Calcavecchia who finished in style. The 29-year-old from Nebraska had joined some of the greatest names in golfing history on Royal Troon's list of Open champions.
The winner of the gold medal and the champion golfer for the year, Mark Calcavecchia.
The members at Royal Troon are now preparing to welcome their next Open champion. The club secretary, James Montgomery, will be hoping that his son Colin can lift the claret jug on home soil. But whoever triumphs will join some of the illustrious names on Royal Troon's Roll of Honour. As the summer days lengthen and the moment of truth approaches, the Scottish elements and Royal Troon's ancient links lie ready to play their part in the annual drama of golf's greatest championship.